In our last lesson, I showed you how to apply styles to an HTML page. And we are going to now take a look at how we can use styles to create the actual design elements on your page. And we'll look at some of the different properties that exist. So just as a refresher, we linked the style sheet here. And the most important attribute of this link tag is the href, because that is the reference to the style sheet itself. We called it style.css, and we can actually look at it here, style.css. In this case, they're in the same folder. So if you look at this style sheet, you notice a few things. There are names of elements, and then there are curly braces. And within those curly braces, we have several properties. And we'll go over some of the different properties that you can apply. But for the body tag, we can apply different properties to it that are sort of the base or the foundation of our page. These are the things that will apply across the page unless we change it somewhere else. So it's always good to apply a standard font family. And you'll notice here we have 3 different typefaces plus a generic sans serif. The user still has to have these typefaces on their computer, so we want to give them the opportunity to use something generic of our choosing that they're likely to have. But if we just definitely know we want a sans serif or a typeface that doesn't have the little flourishes on the letters, then we can be very specific here by providing a list. So if they have Verdana, it'll show Verdana. If not, then it'll look for Arial. If not Arial, Helvetica, and if not, it'll go to a generic sans serif. So you don't have to use this method, but it's a good idea if you want to have the most control of the font in this particular method. And then we added color, which is text color. We have the background color of the page. We could also add a background image at this point. We have a margin left of 10 pixels, and we can use different measures here if we'd like. And then a margin top of 0. I want the page to go completely to the top. And when you use a 0, you don't have to use a measure because 0 is 0, whether it's a pixel or a point or an image. And those are different kinds of measures that we can use in establishing our styles. And I've got some styles here for H1. Particularly, I want to set the font size, and then if I need to do something where I'm removing the margin, I'll do that. I've got H1 at 16 points and paragraph at 12, but I could establish those with anything I want. And of course, I could add other styles here, and I probably will, for the H2, H3, etc., so that I could have some control of how those look. I'd also like to point out here this little trick that helps you get rid of the space between a heading and a paragraph. What you have to do is establish the bottom margin of the element that's on top at 0, and the top margin of the element that's on bottom at 0. And so what this will do for any heading that we want to apply it to is remove that sort of automatic block space that goes between headings and paragraphs. And when we talked about design, we talked about putting things that are related to each other close to one another, and this will accomplish that. And then finally down here I have the A tag, and you'll remember that that's the tag for the anchor that we use to make links on the page, A, href equal, you'll recall. So in this case, we can establish a color for the link, and we do that here as opposed to in the body tag as we had previously done before. And then we can set up a color for it to be visited, so it can be a different color if we want it to look different when it has been visited. You've probably noticed that when you click on something on the web and something's visited, it changes colors to give the user some information. And then we have an extra new element here. We can call this hover of the A, and that will actually change color based on the mouse hovering over a link. And that's not something we were able to do in HTML by itself. And for reference, visited and hover in this case are called pseudo classes. So in this case, we're changing the color and we're changing the text decoration to underline. Our links, we have changed the default from them normally having underline to being none. And then we're adding the text decoration just on the hover. And again, you can play with these and change the colors and make them anything you want. And when we come over here to the page, and I've refreshed it now so that the new style sheet is showing, you can see that when we hover over a link, it changes colors. And you can also see a slight difference in color for links that we visited and those that we haven't visited. So you can see how that looks. You can see that the background color of the page has changed to white, And you can see that some of the other things in terms of taking away the margin and adding some margin on the left-hand side have all been controlled by what we have here in the style sheet for these elements. And again, we can just add an H2 if we wanted to. If I want to copy and paste this and we want it to be basically the same as the H1 except maybe slightly smaller, maybe it's going to be 14px, we can save that, and then if we use an H2 anywhere on the page, that will be controlled by this style. Now on the tutorial itself, I have several properties identified here that you can go through and take a look at to see how you can use them with some different descriptions. We've already talked about some of the font properties. There are color and background properties. There are text properties, box properties. The box properties can control things like margin and padding, which will become very important as you start doing different alignments. There are border properties that let you change the way borders look, and that will be important as we start creating elements that are more containers for our layout. We've got some properties for lists, and then just other general properties for sizing, width, and height. We will discuss float for how that's used for positioning. There's the display elements, position, top, and left. And so these are all different types of properties that we will be discussing. And then we'll get to the point where we start talking about divs and the positioning that we want to use these divs as containers that can help us start doing the layout on our page. So you've probably already done this, but take all the code here on the right, put this in a style sheet, and create the link in the head of your HTML page, and refresh the page, and you should get something that's starting to look like this, where you have the different colors associated with the page and the hover activity happening over the hover of your links. And then you'll know that the page has been, the style sheet has been applied to the page. And play around with those styles. Feel free to play with them and use them and change colors, change sizes, and see how the style sheet interacts with the content on the HTML page. And in our next lesson, we'll start talking about classes and IDs.